sake of the teaching, we are to consider our earthly masters worthy of full respect. And it is saying those who are under the yoke of slavery. So this is not suggesting when your master is good and treats you well. This is talking about someone who is burdened by slavery. And under those conditions, someone should still consider their masters worthy of full respect for the sake of God and for the sake of the teaching. We continue. Those who have believing masters should not show them disrespect just because they are fellow believers. Don't take advantage of that. Instead, they should serve them even better because their masters are dear to them as fellow believers and are devoted to the welfare of their slaves. These are things you ought to teach and to insist on. So that is 1 Timothy chapter 6. Paul encouraging Timothy to teach persons to be respectful and obedient, submissive to their earthly masters. Titus 3, going back to Titus, he says, verse 1, remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, and to be ready to do whatever is good. So Paul is saying, remind the people to subject to rulers and authorities. So it's something that Paul had to remind the church about and encourage Titus and Timothy to tell the church, to remind them that they ought to do this. And finally, in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy chapter 17, the principle is again outlaid. Verse 9, it says, go to the Levitical priest and to the judge. So it speaks about the Levitical priest on one hand, but it also speaks about the judge. So it's not only the religious leaders, the Levitical priests, but also the judges that God set up in the governing system of Israel, the judges who made judgment, who hear cases. They were the leaders, the authorities of the day. And God is saying, go to them, who is in office at the time, inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. He says, you must act according to the decisions that they give you at the place that the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything that they instruct you. Act according to whatever they teach you and the decisions they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you to the right or to the left. Anyone who shows contempt for the judge, we must not show contempt for the leaders or for the priests who stand ministering there to the Lord our God. Anyone who shows contempt to them is to be put to death. That's how seriously God took submission to authority. He said, you must purge the evil out of Israel, suggesting that it's an evil thing to rebel against the established authority. All the people will hear and be afraid, and they will not be contemptuous again. That is how God views rebellion against the authority that has been established. It is contemptuous to him. That is Deuteronomy 17, verse 9 to 13. Therefore, submission applies not in only in the context of the home and of the church, but also to the governing authorities, even when they are wrong. All governing authority is set up by God. Turn with me to Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13. And I heard the Prime Minister quote this in one of his visits to a Seventh-day Adventist church in Hanover recently. And he said, leave the interpretation up to you, but he quoted it. I hear what it says. I'll quote it as well. Verse 1 of Romans 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except that which God has established. So God, any authority, and by any authority, let me put it to you. The Hitlers, the Stalins, all these authorities are established by God. Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, you name it, Pharaoh. Caesar. All of these authorities were established by the Almighty. Let's continue. Romans 13. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but only for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from the fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment to the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary, Paul says here, to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, of course, but also as a matter of conscience. Again, we're talking about godly character. This is why you also pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. These are very challenging scriptures to deal with. And we have to grapple with these scriptures. Because what Paul seems to be saying here, what he definitely is saying here, is that all governing authority is established by God. Turn with me to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, verse 21. Daniel chapter 2, verse 21. And I'll give the context quickly. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He sought out interpreters to tell the dream and to interpret the dream. And here comes Daniel to interpret the dream. And Daniel exclaimed when he got the dream and the meaning of the dream from Elohim. And as he was about to share the meaning, he said this: He, Elohim, God, changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. So it is God who disposes kings and establishes other kings. Daniel chapter 4, verse 32. Daniel 4, verse 32. Again, Daniel giving an interpretation of a vision to Nebuchadnezzar. He says, verse 32, you will be driven away from mankind to live with the beasts of the field, and you will feed on grass like cattle. And 7 times will pass you by until you acknowledge that the Most High is ruler over the kingdom of men, and he gives it to anyone he wishes. So God is the ultimate ruler over the kingdom of men, and God raises up kings. He established kings in order to govern within the kingdom of men. And finally, for this point, John 19, verse 10 to 11. Even Jesus Christ acknowledged that power was given to earthly rulers. In his discourse with Pontius Pilate, before he was crucified, when Pilate said to him in verse 10 of John 19, do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you realize that I have the power to either free you or to crucify you? This is what Pilate is saying to our Creator, Jesus Christ. That he has the power to free him or to crucify him. And Jesus answered. Jesus didn't say, you don't have no power. Jesus did not say to him that you do not have the power. I am the Creator. Jesus said, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. So Jesus is establishing that all governing authority is set up by Elohim above. And the final of the 4 principles. The only time we should not submit to the authority is if they demand that we do something that is contrary to God's commandments. So let me make this clear. I am not suggesting that in all circumstances we should submit to earthly authorities. No, that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting and what the Bible suggests is that, yes, they are established by God and we should submit to them. But when the decision to submit contradicts the law of God, then we must submit to the higher authority, which is God, our Savior. And we see this in Deuteronomy chapter 13. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 1. It says, if a prophet, and by the way, in the Old Testament, the prophet was an authoritative office. The prophet was an authoritative office. He had authority. If you remember, the people said, God don't speak to us directly. Let Moses go and talk to Moses, and then he will come back and tell us what you have said.